welcome into the show. It is just me tonight, riding solo. Holler and Ron had some family obligations, but we got some players on the football field back again. Finally, all 32 teams have reported to training camp and have started practicing in some capacity. So, wanted to bring out a quick episode for you guys to kind of recap some of the news we're seeing, some of the blurbs that we're getting out of camp, kind of highlight some of that. We also got a little bit of news over the past week too, so we'll start there. A couple wide receivers are facing some possible suspensions. Rasheed Rice and Jordan Addison both kind of settled their legal issues this past week. Jordan Addison had the DUI. Generally speaking, the NFL has given 3-game suspensions for that. Nothing official's come out yet, but I expect that to come out sooner rather than later. In terms of dynasty, I wouldn't expect anything to change with his value for redraft or like best ball. Definitely going to drop him pretty significantly. 3 games is a decent chunk. The thing that I wanted to point out there is that like at least with the 3 games that he will miss, assuming it is 3 games, it'll happen before the bye week start, right? It'll happen before a bunch of injuries mount up. So if you have an IR spot on your leagues redraft that you can stash as suspended players, I think that's a viable strategy. Or you can probably get him late because some other people might not be thinking that way. That might be a way you can kind of get ahead. And then Rasheed Rice, he settled out of court with his case too, and so I think he's facing probably a heftier suspension. I'd say somewhere between 4 to 6 games, just because his did involve some like reckless driving and some other not great stuff. Again, Rasheed Rice for Dynasty, not changing his value for redraft. It definitely drops him significantly. Where before I was expecting him to play the full 17 games and get a suspension next year, now it's looking more and more possible that he will get suspended for the start of 2025. Which I so his redraft value, man, he was going like I guess somewhere in like the second round, which now looking back at it seems a little messed up. But yeah, I would expect this to drop Rasheed Rice probably to like the later rounds, if he gets drafted like at all. Just because if it's 6 games, like that's a almost like half of the fantasy regular season for redraft, and that's just too long of a time to go without a star player. Now that said, like if because then you are starting to bleed into the bye weeks where it's like I really want to hold a roster spot on a guy. Um, uh, it's going to be once we get a little more clarity on the situation, we can kind of figure out where he should go. But as of right now, those are 2 names that I'm watching to see if the suspensions hit. I would expect them to come probably before the beginning of August, so the next week or two here. Another not so fun news out of Chargers camp. Najee Harris. We touched on that last week that he got put on the NFI, which is like the non-football injury list. It sounds like this injury was way more significant than we were led to believe originally. Obviously, he had the eye injury from some fireworks on the 4th of July. Uh, Coach Harbaugh said, "I don't know if he'll be back for camp," and that he is praying for his recovery. So that to me doesn't sound good. That sounds like it sounds like is he questionable to play like at all this year? Is he going to start on the pup? Is he going to come back later in the season? Like that statement kind of made me go, "Oh, I don't know how much he's going to play." And the thing is too with Najee Harris, like while he is a vet, he's on a new team, right? He's wearing a new offense. It's not like he's still in Pittsburgh and he's been around the system and he can just like hop in. Like he needs these reps in training camp. So this is kind of huge for him. I was expecting a kind of close to a 50-50 timeshare between him and Omarion Hampton, especially at the start of the season where Harris probably got a larger chunk of the load. But now it's definitely, Omarion season is here. Omarion Hampton, I was just looking before I started recording, and he's up to running back 6 right now on Keep Trade Cut, which I guess I get it, right? He has the first round draft capital, and now it's like he's pretty much the guy. If you look at the depth chart behind him, assuming Najee Harris is, I don't know what the deal is with him, but assuming let's say he doesn't play, it's Hassan Haskins, it's Kimani Vidal, which is like the 6th round rookie that everyone was talking about last year. Naheem Hines they signed off the street, so it's pretty bleak out of Chargers camp. It might be the Marion Hampton show, and he might be getting a ton of volume right away. In which case, running back 6 might be low. Like if you think about it, he'll be behind Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs. He might jump up to that 3-4 range with him and Genty, depending on if we get news that Najee Harris isn't going to be ready to go, and Hampton just takes off, like I don't think even if Harris can come back, say it's like October, I don't think he's just going to suddenly just get a ton of work. You know what I mean? Especially if Marion Hampton is getting just like tremendous, doing really well the first like 3 4 weeks of the season. So something to keep an eye on there too, to see Najee Harris watch. I hope the best for him. Also, be safe with fireworks. Another news out of Chargers camp: Mike Williams has retired. He was gonna open up on the PUP list for Chargers camp, and then it came out a couple days later that he just retired. He's 30 years old. Not I don't know if he was going to play a huge role, but I think that's a kind of a big hit to their depth. Looking at their wide receiver depth chart outside of Lamb McConkey, they drafted Trey Harris in the second round this past year. They have Quentin Johnson still there, obviously. Outside of that, it gets real bleak real fast. They have Jalen Rager on their roster, Darius Davis. They have another rookie. I think they drafted him in the fifth round, Keandre Lambert Smith, who has been tearing up my timeline. Apparently in Chargers camp, he's been looking real good. But outside of that, I mean, it's if one of those top three guys gets hurt, it's looking kind of bleak, which isn't great for Justin Herbert. Probably another point in Marion Hampton's favor is that they're just kind of lean on the run even more, uh, because now the wide receiver depth is starting to lack as well. Staying in California, but moving up north, Brandon Ayuk and Ricky Pearsall opened up camp on the PUP list. It sounds like Ricky Pearsall is going to be activated off the PUP sometime soon. At least that's the word from Kyle Shanahan. That said, he doesn't exactly have the best track record with injury reports. See the CMC injury last year. Brandon Ayuk, we got a quote from their GM, John Lynch, saying that he was nowhere close to having a concrete timeline. That basically confirms to me that he's going to start the season on the PUP, which means he's going to miss a minimum of 4 weeks. That said, with Brandon Ayuk, like if he does start in the PUP, so he's out all of September, there's usually a ramp up period. He's coming off a torn ACL and MCL. It might be closer to Thanksgiving, December before he starts looking like his old self. So there's definitely room for Ricky Pearsall if he gets off the PUP and can play, or Juwan Jennings to kind of take command of that offense. To me, they also signed Equanimeous St. Brown off the street to join their team. I think they just need a camp body. Jacob Cowing, who ironically Kyle Shanahan was talking up, pulled a hamstring in practice the other day too. That wide receiver room is looking real thin out in San Francisco. If I tell you what, if Christian McCaffrey is ready to go, he might get a huge workload. Him and Isaac Arendo might be in for a ton of work. Just because I don't know what the confidence of the wide receiver room is, right? Juwan Jennings has been kind of a role player. He had a nice year last year. Ricky Pearsall, I mean, he had a nice end to the season last year, but it remains to be seen how good he is. He also missed a lot of the offseason program with a hamstring injury. They did show a clip of him running around at camp today, so hopefully he is closer to returning, and we can see what he can do. He definitely has all the opportunity in the world to go out and prove people like me wrong that have said that he's not good enough to play. So we will see there, but to me, this screams George Kittle and the running backs are going to be in for a huge workload with all these wide receiver injuries piling up. And then finally, Noah Fant was released from Seattle. This was kind of a surprise that they released him right now at the start of camp instead of earlier in the offseason. I'm not sure if there was some financial relief from the cap or what the idea there was. This basically leaves AJ Barner and Elijah Arroyo, who they drafted in the second round, to compete for that tight end spot in Seattle. Where does Noah Fant end up? I think is the question here. I think, is he going to go somewhere where maybe they don't have a tight end and he can bolster a room, or is he going to go somewhere and kind of mess up a different fantasy situation? And that's what I've been keeping an eye on, right? So I think that the Jaguars would be a nice little spot. They let Evan Ingram go this offseason. They have Brenton Strange, who is largely unproven in that room. I think they could benefit from a guy like Noah Fant, get an extra pass catcher. The Chargers, I think they could use a tight end as well. I know there's a lot of hype around Aranda Gadsden, who they drafted this past year, but they have Will Dissly. They don't have a ton of proven depth there. The New York Giants, I think, could also benefit from Noah Fant. Theo Johnson's a nice piece, and then but again, he's also unproven, similar to Brenton Strange in Jacksonville. So I think those are some landing spots that they could go. Apparently, I think I saw he's going to visit Cincinnati too. Um, it's nice to get Joe Burrow another weapon. That does kind of suck for Mike Gesicki though. Gesicki kind of had a nice little spot where if one of T Higgins or Jamar Chase got hurt, you knew Gesicki was in for a big workload. If they bring in Noah Fant now, it just kind of kills both of them, I think, and they might have some nice weeks here or there, but you're never going to know which one to play. So that's one thing to keep an eye on too. I expect him to sign relatively soon, just and especially if a tight end goes down with injury over the next week or so, as they put the pads on across the league. So keep an eye on Noah Fant. And then George Pickens earlier today went down with an apparent hamstring injury. He kind of laid on the ground for a little bit. Trainers came over, huddled around him. Um, he got up and walked off on his own power. So I don't think it's anything too serious, but it is a little bit concerning just because hamstrings can tend to linger. I think we've seen this time and time again where a guy has a hamstring issue in training camp, maybe takes it easy, he comes back and then it tweaks again, and then it's it bleeds into the regular season, and so just something to keep an eye on there. Hopefully they let him just kind of take it easy. It is kind of a bummer though too, because George Pickens is learning a new offense. Obviously he was traded from Pittsburgh to Dallas in the offseason, so he needs some of these reps. I had heard some good things from the first couple practices where he was looking really good, and then obviously he goes down. So we don't know how severe the injury is, so we'll keep an eye on that. But hopefully he's good to go and doesn't bleed into the regular season. That's it for the news. Some other camp blurbs that we have been seeing across my timeline, uh, out of Chargers camp, and this is a lot of it is from Chargers because they reported earlier than anyone else and they've been practicing longer. So, and people are desperate for clips out there. But Trey Harris apparently has been dominating Chargers camp. Justin Herbert was talking him up, saying that basically you can count on him. He picks up the offense really fast. He's going to run the right route. That's huge, especially because we just talked about the wide receiver room is already like it's pretty little on terms of depth. So there's definitely an opportunity there for Trey Harris. He's a good player. Keandre Lambert-Smith touched on him earlier, but he's been showing flashes. I saw a couple different clips of him just routing people up. He's a guy to keep in mind for preseason DFS. I think he's going to get a lot of run because that room is pretty thin and they're not going to play the starters. And I would expect him to get a large chunk of playing time. So we should get a good look at him probably next week in the Hall of Fame game when they play the Lions in Canton. And then finally, we got a quote from Bengals offensive coordinator Dan Pitcher saying that Chase Brown is going to be a focal point of the offense. Love to hear that. I know I'd bet Ron's excited too. He loves Chase Brown. Definitely a good player. I think those who had him in Dynasty and held on to him during the offseason and held out hope for that he didn't get replaced during the draft are going to be rewarded for that. In terms of redraft, I think Chase Brown's a pretty locked and loaded RB1 this season. Basically, he's a better Joe Mixon. Like Joe Mixon always got a ton of volume where he ended up just kind of falling into an RB1 season. I think Chase Brown's a lot more efficient running the ball than Joe Mixon is. So, assuming Joe Burrow stays healthy, like he should get a healthy workload and be ready to go. Now I want to touch on a couple training camp battles that we're watching, particularly on the offensive side of the ball for fantasy. So let's start with the quarterback position. Real quick, I didn't include the Giants on there just because I do assume Russell Wilson's going to start in New York, not Jackson Dart. I do think Dart will get some opportunity later in the season, but I do expect it to be Russ to begin with. But first one I want to talk about is the Browns room. They have 4 potential starting quarterbacks, and potentials might be doing a lot of work there. Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, who they traded for during the NFL draft, Dylan Gabriel, who they drafted, and Shedeur Sanders, who they also drafted. My take on this room is they have 4 quarterbacks. I don't think they go into the season with all 4 still on the roster. That said, it would be weird if they went in with more than 3 active, roster members on the quarterback position because they don't play special teams. You only have 53 spots. Like using 4 roster spots on the quarterback room is just a lot, especially because only one guy plays. So I would expect one of these guys to get cut. Dylan Gabriel and Shadur Sanders are both rookies. They were drafted this year. Unless they just completely, suck during training camp, I would expect those two to still be there. So then it's just a matter of, does Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett win the starting quarterback job? My money's on Joe Flacco. He's shown that he can execute an offense. Kenny Pickett has never really shown that he can do much. He's his touchdown numbers are horrendous, and that he barely has thrown any. He's turned the ball over a ton. I don't think he's in a situation where, like, I just don't think he's going to beat out Joe Flacco, and I don't think he shows enough that it's like, oh yeah, this can be our guy potentially. So I my prediction is Joe Flacco starts week 1. He wins the job. Kenny Pickett gets cut or traded, doesn't make the 53-man roster. And then at some point during the year, Dylan Gabriel and Shadur Sanders will start games for the Cleveland Browns. It doesn't boast like a ton of confidence for any of the pass catchers. I think Jerry Jeudy will be fine, and David Njoku. I just think they're going to get like a ton of targets just like focused their way, because there's not much else there, right? Like, there's Cedric Tillman, and then the running backs, there's Jerome Ford and Dylan Sampson, and then assuming Quinshon Judkins signs and doesn't get suspended, he'll be there as well and kind of in the mix. But right now he's still unsigned, so um, he's not really a part of their offense at the moment. But if Joe Flacco starts for the Browns week 1, I would feel real good firing up my David Njoku's and my Jerry Judy's, man, because they're going to get just a ton of work. Um, the Colts quarterback room, Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones are both fighting for the starting job in Indianapolis. I, man, I don't know what to think about this one. Apparently, they've been alternating reps with the ones during like their morning and afternoon practices. From all accounts, it doesn't seem like any one of them is necessarily impressing all that much. I, I think they really would like Anthony Richardson to win the job. I just I don't know if he's going to, right? And I think Daniel Jones is going to have to stand out to get the job, because I think they do believe in Anthony Richardson and they want him to be their guy. I know their GM was talking just earlier today about how other teams are probably regretting moving on from Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. And look at them now. And I don't think you mentioned Geno Smith, but that's another example of a guy who didn't quite work out. They moved to different teams and then they kind of took off, and saying that you might need to be patient. So I think Daniel Jones probably starts week 1, but I do think Anthony Richardson will. I think he'll start games at some point during the season. I don't think Daniel Jones, like, if he wins a job, I don't think it's like, oh, he's 100% going to get the job and just keep it all year long. Assuming Jones starts week 1, I do think Anthony Richardson will have some packages that he can come into the game, whether that's in the red zone or just, some special like rushing and maybe some go balls to Alec Pierce, because that's kind of what he does best. But this is going to be an interesting one just to see where they go. I would kind of expect them to both get um, different opportunities to start their preseason games. Whether that's like they each get a half, week 1, then week 2, and then they kind of move forward there. This is a quarterback battle that might go to the end of training camp, but I do think Daniel Jones is going to be the one that ultimately wins the job. But I just think he can execute an offense more efficiently than Anthony Richardson, even though Richardson probably offers more upside if he can pull everything together. Last quarterback room I want to talk about, the New Orleans Saints. They, after Derek Carr retired this offseason, it kind of left that starting job up for grabs. They drafted Tyler Shuck, who was drafted with the top 40 pick this last in the NFL draft, and then Spencer Rattler, who they spent a 4th-round pick on last year. Rattler had an opportunity last year. He didn't do a ton. He actually ended up losing his job to Jake Hayner. So obviously that wasn't ideal. But he did get that opportunity. There was a caveat there where like Chris Olave was injured. I think Alvin Kamara got banged up there for a little bit too. Their receiver rooms, they were just finding dudes off the street to come play wide receiver for the Saints. So like there's some built-in kind of excuses for Rattler and why he didn't do well last year. I do think Tyler Shuck is going to be the one that ultimately wins the job here. Let's say Shuck starts week 1. What does that mean for the rest of the offense? I would expect a lot of checkdowns to Alvin Kamara. Chris Olave, I think they are going to kind of hyper target him just because he's by far the best receiving option they have in New Orleans. The thing that is concerning to me, so Rashid Shaheed, I really like him a lot. That he excels at go balls and as a returner. He was starting to get more work as just like a receiver as well, not just running deep throws. But can Tyler Shack or Spencer Rattler? I don't think either one of them can support more than basically Chris Olave, right? And so I am having a little bit of concern for Shaheed. I like the talent, I like the player a lot, but I don't know, especially with like Tyler Shuck and like rookies, generally speaking, they don't take chances and throw with 50-50 balls and just like throw like deep balls. They kind of play it safe, throw it short, which is hence to why I mentioned a lot of checkdowns to Kamara. That's not really Shaheed's game, so we'll see if they change the offense or what the offense looks like under. Um, I'm blanking on his name. He was from Philadelphia. Played at Boise State. The old quarterback, Kellen Moore. Uh, we'll see what the offense looks like, but this is one that I don't have a ton of like faith in this offense looking good to begin with. This is like a legitimate. They're in the running for the 101. I think this team it could be really bad, but I do think Alvin Kamara will be good. Just based on volume alone. And then Chris Olave, if he can stay healthy, I think he's going to get as much targets as he can handle. So we'll see what happens there. Moving on from the quarterback position, we got a couple running back rooms that I'm keeping an eye on during training camp. The first one going to Dallas, they had Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, and Jadon Blue. Jadon Blue obviously is the rookie and kind of a hot name. He was the one that he's very fast. He also fumbled the ball a ton at Texas. The his profile basically doesn't lend itself to being like a volume running back. He would be better suited as more of a 1B kind of guy, but he might be the one that, with his speed could house different touches. Um, that said, there's been some reports that came out lately that they think that Jaden Blue is, I think they said borderline lazy, which is far from a ringing endorsement. That's concerning. Doesn't bode well that like as a rookie, you're before training camp even starts and you're already getting talked about like how you're lazy, not putting in the work to learn the offense. That doesn't make me feel good about that. I personally think Javonte Williams is going to get at least the first shot to be the running back, and I think he'll start the season as kind of getting the majority of the carries. Whether he does anything with that is remains to be seen. But I think there's some value to be had in the Dallas, offense. I think they're going to be a heavy passing team. It wouldn't shock me if they led the league in passing attempts this year with Dak Prescott. I love the passing game. Dak Prescott's going to throw the ball a ton. I think Ferguson, Pickens, and CeeDee Lamb are going to just absolutely feast in this offense. That said, they can't throw the ball every down. So the running back there will be opportunities there. Guys get tackled inside the 5. They run the ball. Someone might fall, face first into the end zone and get some touchdowns, see some volume there. I think Javonte Williams kind of has some sneaky value as like a nice flex play at the end of your lineup, assuming he's the one that gets the work. Miles Sanders, I think he's a role player at this point of his career. I don't think he has the juice to be the guy anymore. So we'll kind of see what happens there. My money's on Javonte Williams, and then maybe Jadon Blue takes over and starts getting more and more work as the season goes on. I think that's probably what Dallas would like, is if one of these guys can step up, but we'll see what happens. I think Javonte Williams starts the year, though, as getting the most carries. And then staying with the running backs, moving to Jacksonville, they have 3 running backs that I think are probably pretty good. I would feel better about this room than in Dallas's room, especially given the offense with Liam Cohen coming in. We saw what he did last year in Tampa Bay for that offense. Baker Mayfield had a career year. Bucky Irving, obviously, as a rookie, was sensational. Rashad White, who people like to dump on Rashad White being just okay, but he was our RB2 last year, right? So there was plenty of fantasy points to go around for this offense. The run game was fantastic. Travis Etienne is there. I think he's the one that probably starts the year, at least gets the first opportunity to be the guy. Bashal Tootin is the one they drafted in the 4th round. They really like Tootin. He does have a bit of a fumbling issue. That's one thing I want to keep an eye on during camp is any reports of him fumbling, that's going to set him back significantly. And then there's Tank Bigsby, who I don't want to say is the worst one out of the three, but I think he's the least talented out of the three. Not to say he's bad necessarily, but I don't think he's suited to be the 1A in this offense, right? Like I know he had a couple good games last year, one of which was in like a London game where they had stayed in London the week before, and there was kind of a there was basically there's some caveats to some of his biggest games where they played a team that was coming across the seas to London where he had already been there and he tore them up. There were some other teams like I think it was Tennessee or Indianapolis who had a ton of tackling issues. I don't I think Hank Bigsby will have a role in this offense. I think he's going to be more of like a short yardage kind of goal line guy, which might prove to have some volume or some value there. Excuse me, if he has the goal line work, say he can fall into the end zone 4, 5, 6 times, then maybe he's useful for your fantasy lineup. Uh, Travis Etienne is the one that I think he still has the pedigree, right? It wasn't that long ago that he was like the RB2 to start for the first half of the season. He was all banged up last year. I think people forget that he did get hurt. He was playing through injury. He wasn't right last year. I think there's a better offensive system around him now. I think he gets the opportunity, and I think he'll do well with it. But I do think Bashal Tootin will get opportunities as well. But I think he's going to be kind of more of like a 1B, almost like a Tajay Spears type, where yeah, and hopefully more explosive than Tajay Spears. Where it's like, maybe he only gets 10, 11 touches a game, but he could do a lot with those 10, 11 touches, right? And he doesn't need like the 20 carries to make an impact on your fantasy team. But that's one to keep an eye on. Maybe he gets more involved at the end of the season, but we'll see what the reports are there. Really, with Tootin, just want to see if he has any fumbling issues. Moving to the receiving room, the New England Patriots have a ton of wide receivers. I don't think there's a ton of like talent in the room. Well, we can just kind of go over. So Stephon Diggs is there, Demario Douglas, Kyle Williams, Mac Hollins, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, and Keishon Butte are their wide receiver room at the moment. That's a ton of wide receivers. I think realistically, they carry 5, maybe 6 if one of them is going to play special teams on the 53-man roster. Stephon Diggs and Matt Collins, Demario Douglas, and Kyle Williams, I think, are locks for the roster. So that's 4 of the spots. And then it's just a matter of, okay, Keishon Butte is probably going to get one of the other ones. And then do they still believe in Jalen Polk or Javon Baker enough to carry a 6th guy? I don't know. Jalen Polk was pretty awful last year. Javon Baker couldn't get on the field. We'll see. It's a new coaching staff. They have an opportunity to kind of, with a fresh set of coaching eyes, to make an impact and kind of get a pass for last year. That said, the opportunity is there for them to make the roster. They're going to have to step up and do something. I want to touch real quick on Kyle Williams. I saw some reports out of New England camp recently that basically he's making plays left and right and he's getting open. I think he could potentially be really good. We'll see. See if the drum beat keeps going. They're only a couple practices in, but that's one name I'm keeping an eye on. And it's Stephon Diggs. By all reports, he looks good. I know there were some questions about whether or not he was going to be ready to go. He's older, coming off the ACL injury, but apparently he's ready to go. I saw him walking around after practice day. He didn't have a brace on his knee. He looked okay. He was chasing like a dog around camp, which is kind of funny, but I think he's good to go. Demario Douglas, supposedly he's fitting really well into Josh McDaniels' offense in New England. One thing about Josh McDaniels, he's not a good head coach, but he is a good play caller. He's a good offensive mind. So I do think this offense will look a lot better than it did the last couple of years, where they kind of were just piecemealing, random offensive plays together and hoping for the best. That said, I don't think anyone's going to be like stand out as like, oh, this is going to be like wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. I think best case Stephon Diggs is like a top 30 wide receiver, right? Maybe Demario Douglas kind of fits in that 35 to 40 range. Kyle Williams might have some games here or there. Mike Hollins is more of a blocker. I don't see a ton of like crazy value coming out of those guys, but hopefully they're good enough to support Drake May. I think it's probably the biggest thing from this wide receiver room can do is that like can they be efficient enough, get open enough to help Drake May develop in year two in New England, and I think he'll be all right, right? Like I think there's enough talent. I think they could definitely have an upgrade at some of these positions, but I think there's enough talent that it's not going to like stifle Drake May into doing like nothing, right? So moving to the Green Bay Packers. There are a ton of reports that Tucker Craft is dominating their camp, and I know they lined up in 12 personnel, so two tight end, one running back sets a lot. When they were running those two wide receiver sets, it was Romeo Dobbs and Matthew Golden, who were the two receivers, Jaden Reed not being that one. That would be interesting to see how often do they run, two wide receiver sets? Are they primarily an 11 personnel team, so they're having three wide receivers on the field, and Jaden Reed, Golden, and Romeo Dubs are the three wide receivers running on the field consistently. Yeah, that's it's kind of the same song and dance with Jaden Reed, right? Is like he's really good, but how often is he going to be on the field? How often are they going to get him targets? When he gets the ball, he's awesome, but he also just has a tendency to disappear at times. Is that going to change? Is Matthew Golden going to step up and be kind of the top target? And honestly, who's gonna lead the team in targets, or is it gonna be just like dead even across maybe Golden, Kraft, Reed that it just does any of them matter from a fantasy perspective? And that's what I'm watching in the training camp, right? Over these next few weeks is like who's standing out, right? Is it a different name every day? Does one name, maybe it's Romeo Dubs, right? Jordan Love seems to love him. Maybe it's just Tucker Kraft just every day. That's what it was today. We'll see if that's what happens again tomorrow, or maybe Matthew Golden has a nice day. I I would love it for a fantasy perspective if one of them just like stood out and was like, yes, this is their guy, this is their number one, and then everyone else kind of gets secondary targets, but like they're gonna feed their one guy, and maybe that's a pipe dream, but we shall see. That's one thing I'm trying to see, right? Looking in Green Bay, like who's the name that keeps getting repeated as the one that stood out in the receiver group, if there is one, right? Um, and then finally, the Seattle Seahawks. So I want to touch on the tight end room. We touched on that at the beginning with Noah Fant being released. They have AJ Barner and Elijah Arroyo. AJ Barner has primarily been a blocker in his career. About 50% of his snaps came in line, and then his last season it came in line, and then he also played a little bit in the slot, but not a ton. Also, his receiving numbers in college were pretty low. I think his high for receiving yards was like 249. So I think this opportunity is huge for Elijah Arroyo. Like they drafted him pretty early. I want to say in the second or third round in the NFL draft this past year. He has a wide open opportunity, right? And I'm assuming that he's shown enough during, off-season practices that they said, yeah, we feel good getting rid of Noah Fant. I don't think they would have done that if they didn't feel like confident in one of these tight ends or maybe a combination of both. Um, Looking at the tight ends that Sam Darnold threw to last year, 22% of his pass attempts went to tight ends last season, and which I feel like stands out to me for two reasons. One, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison were on those teams, right? Like it wasn't like there was no wide receivers, so they were throwing to tight ends. And TJ Hawkinson was coming back from an injury and he wasn't himself. And then it was just like a couple just the guys, right? In the tight end room, and he still threw the tight end a ton. I think this offense will obviously run through Jackson Smith and Jigba, but I think there's going to be fantasy relevant players here in the tight end room. Whether it's AJ Barner, maybe he steps up as more of a receiver, or maybe it's Arroyo. I think they want Arroyo to be the guy. I think they drafted him to kind of be that receiving threat. Like he wasn't drafted because of his blocking. I can tell you that. AJ Barner I think they run a lot of 12 personnel, and he kind of stays in line to help. The offensive line has some questions. Barner's a good blocker, so maybe he can stay in and kind of help pass block while Arroyo gets more receiving work there. But those guys reported to camp I think today, and so I don't know if they've started practicing in pads yet. But that's one thing I'm keeping an eye on. Seattle is what does the tight ends look like? Where's Jackson Smith and Jigba lining up? is the other thing. Cooper Cup, um, those guys, it seems like they have just like a ton of guys that want to play in the slot or their best positions in the slot. Well, not everyone can play there, right? Someone's got to go outside. So want to see what that looks like out in Seattle and see how Sam Darnold looks. He's kind of been feast or famine. Well, obviously, last year he was awesome, but now he's got a new system. He's got different talent. He's got probably a worse offensive line and probably a worse receiving core around him. We'll see what he looks like. But similar to the Green Bay Packers camp with Seattle, I just want to see like who are the names that are standing out in camp, particularly with the tight ends, because those are the guys I would like to focus on and kind of who's going to get more be more fantasy relevant for and help your teams win games. So I hope this was useful for you guys. Next week, Holler will be back with me, and I think we have a special guest coming in next week. I got to double check on our schedule, um, but obviously stick with us. Training camp is kicking off. We're going to get more and more news. Hopefully, no injuries, but it is part of football. If injuries do happen, we'll be here to give you some trade news. If if you're a rebuilding team, the best targets to acquire are the guys who get injured, especially if your team's not going to compete this year, and other teams are thinking they're going to, and they lose a key component. Like, don't be afraid to go after target guys and tank. But hopefully, no injuries, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Definitely appreciate it. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Um, Feel free to join our Discord. There'll be a link in our description. You can join our Patreon. There'll be a link there as well. We'll be happy to have you in the Discord. It's totally free. The Patreon starts at $5 a month. It would mean a ton to us if you joined and supported the show. But if not, just happy to have you. Happy to have you watching, and thank you so much. We'll catch you on the next one.